third party lost a huge amount of money yesterday. Now they're desperately searching for your soulmate after discovering what he secretly changed, and why he did it all for you. My beloved child. Yesterday, something happened that the third party never believed was possible. A huge amount of money disappeared from their reach, and the moment they discovered it, their first reaction wasn't anger, it was panic. Because this wasn't simply about money being lost. Something had been secretly changed before the loss happened, and the person behind that change was your soulmate. Now the third party is desperately searching for him, calling people who might know where he is, asking questions they never expected to ask. But here is what makes this strange: your soulmate apparently knew this moment was coming. He had quietly prepared for it, leaving almost nothing obvious behind except one decision that points directly toward you. Don't skip, because what he changed wasn't random, and the reason he changed it may completely alter what you thought was happening between you. For a long time, the third party believed they had something your soulmate could never take back. It may have been financial access, an agreement, a shared arrangement, or simply control over something valuable enough to keep him tied to them. That confidence made them careless. They assumed he would continue playing by the same rules because changing anything would create questions, arguments, and consequences. But sometime before yesterday, your soulmate made a quiet move. No dramatic confrontation. No warning. He simply changed an important detail connected to the money, and apparently he did it in a way that only became obvious after the loss occurred. That is why the third party's behavior suddenly changed. They aren't only trying to recover what vanished. They are trying to understand what your soulmate knew, and how long he had been planning to separate himself from their control. And there is one detail they discovered afterward that made your name impossible to ignore. The most revealing part is that your soulmate didn't appear to make this decision for personal gain. If anything, he may have made his own situation more complicated by doing it. That is what frightened the third party most. They began realizing that the money was only the surface of a much deeper decision. Somewhere along the way, your soulmate had stopped protecting the arrangement that kept everyone comfortable and started protecting something else, something connected to his future, his freedom, and the person he truly wanted beside him. You. But stay till the end, because the third party has now uncovered evidence of one final change he made before everything collapsed yesterday. And when they saw exactly where that change pointed, they stopped worrying about the money for a moment. They suddenly understood what your soulmate was preparing to do next, and why finding him became urgent. By the time the third party understood that final change, the situation had already moved beyond their control. What they discovered wasn't some impulsive decision your soulmate made yesterday. The record suggested he had been carefully separating himself from an arrangement that had kept him trapped for much longer than anyone realized. One connection was removed. Another was redirected. Something the third party believed they could always use to pull him back suddenly carried far less power. That explained their desperate search for him. They weren't simply asking, "Where did the money go?" They were asking a much more frightening question: why didn't he tell us what he was doing? And then another detail surfaced. Shortly before making the most important change, your soulmate had apparently asked a question about protecting something for the future. He never mentioned you directly, but the timing made the third party suspicious. They started connecting his unusual silence, his emotional distance, and the decisions he had been making whenever your name entered his thoughts. Then someone close to the situation remembered a conversation that suddenly meant something completely different. Your soulmate had quietly said that he was tired of allowing temporary circumstances to decide his permanent future. At the time, nobody understood what he meant. Now they did. He wasn't talking only about money. He was talking about control. He had realized that as long as the third party remained financially connected to certain parts of his life, they would always have a reason to interfere with whatever came next. So he began closing those doors one by one. Not recklessly. Not cruelly. Carefully. And that is why yesterday's loss hit the third party so hard. They had been watching the money, while your soulmate had been changing the structure underneath it. But there was still one unanswered question. Why would he risk creating this much tension now? Something huge is waiting for you, because the answer appears to be connected to a decision about you that he had kept completely private. That private decision became clearer when the third party discovered something they were never supposed to see. There was evidence that your soulmate had recently changed the way he was planning for the next chapter of his life. Suddenly, choices that once included the third party no longer seemed to include them at all. And instead of looking backward, everything pointed toward a future he had been quietly imagining with someone else. That realization turned their panic into desperation. They began reaching out to mutual connections, trying to find out whether your soulmate had spoken to you, whether he had made plans, and whether you already knew what was happening. But here is the twist. Your soulmate had apparently kept you away from the financial drama intentionally. He didn't want you pulled into the conflict before he had finished what he started. And just when the third party believed they had discovered his entire plan, one person revealed that your soulmate had left behind a specific instruction, and the words attached to it changed the meaning of everything. Those instructions were never meant to frighten anyone, but the moment the third party heard about them, their entire understanding of your soulmate's plan shifted. He had apparently made it clear that certain decisions were not to be reversed without him personally approving them. That meant the third party couldn't simply pressure someone into restoring the old arrangement. The door they expected to reopen had effectively been locked. But what truly unsettled them was the reason your soulmate had reportedly given: he wanted his future decisions protected from outside influence. Suddenly, every unanswered question pointed in the same direction. This wasn't revenge over money. It wasn't an emotional outburst. Your soulmate had deliberately removed a source of control because he believed it could interfere with something deeply personal he intended to pursue. And when someone asked him why he was willing to create such a dramatic change, his answer was surprisingly simple: there was one person he refused to lose because of someone else's expectations. The third party immediately wanted to know who that person was, but your soulmate had been careful. He hadn't left your name sitting openly where anyone could use it against him. Instead, there were smaller clues. A conversation he refused to discuss. A future plan he suddenly protected. A decision he postponed until he could make it freely. Each detail alone meant very little, but together they created a picture the third party could no longer ignore. They remembered how differently he behaved whenever the subject of genuine happiness came up. They remembered the moments when he became quiet instead of defending the arrangement around him. Most importantly, they realized his recent changes had started after he accepted one painful truth. If he continued allowing financial pressure to dictate his choices, he might permanently lose the person he actually cared about. That person was you. Don't skip, because once the third party understood this, they stopped searching for your soulmate merely to discuss the lost money. They wanted to reach him before he could complete one more decision. And that final decision may explain why your soulmate has remained so difficult for them to reach. He apparently anticipated that the moment the financial loss became visible, there would be frantic questions, pressure, and attempts to make him reconsider. So instead of arguing, he created distance. He wanted enough space to finish whatever he had already begun. The third party, meanwhile, started contacting people who might know his intentions, and one of those conversations produced a revelation they weren't prepared for. Someone close to your soulmate admitted that he had recently spoken about correcting a mistake from his past, not financially, but emotionally. He believed he had allowed fear and outside influence to keep him away from someone who deserved the truth. And then came the detail that changed everything. Before disappearing from the third party's immediate reach, your soulmate had apparently asked how soon he could make one particular change official. What that change involves has not yet been revealed, but the person who heard the question immediately knew it had something to do with you. What happened next made the third party realize they had been chasing the wrong problem from the beginning. They had treated yesterday's financial loss like the main event, but your soulmate had apparently viewed it as the final consequence of a decision he had already made. The mysterious change he wanted to make official wasn't about taking more money or punishing anyone. It was about removing the last obligation that could be used to keep him emotionally tied to the third party. According to someone who knew part of the situation, your soulmate had asked what would happen if he completely separated his future plans from the arrangement that had controlled him for so long. That question immediately raised alarms. Because once that separation became permanent, the third party wouldn't just lose financial influence. They would lose their strongest reason to remain involved in his choices. And suddenly, their desperate search for him made perfect sense. But there was another discovery they hadn't expected. While trying to understand when your soulmate began planning all of this, they traced his change in behavior back to one particular period. Something had happened involving you. Perhaps it was a conversation, a missed opportunity, or simply the moment he realized how much distance had grown between you. Whatever occurred, it forced him to confront something he had avoided for too long. He could keep protecting an arrangement that made everyone else comfortable, or he could finally protect the future he actually wanted. He couldn't do both. And this time, he chose differently. Someone remembered him saying that losing money could be repaired, but losing the right person because he was afraid to act might become permanent. Those words suddenly carried enormous weight. The third party finally understood why he had accepted such a serious financial consequence without immediately trying to undo it. To him, yesterday's loss wasn't bigger than losing you. Now the third party's desperation has taken another turn. They are no longer only trying to locate your soulmate. They are trying to determine whether he has already contacted you. Every unanswered call makes them more nervous. Every person who refuses to explain his whereabouts creates another question. Because they suspect that once your soulmate speaks openly to you, the old arrangement may become impossible to rebuild. Stay till the end, because one person finally admitted that your soulmate had prepared something before the financial situation exploded. It wasn't money. It wasn't another secret transaction. It was something far more personal, a message he had apparently rewritten several times because he couldn't decide how much truth to reveal at once. And according to the person who knew about it, there was one sentence near the end that explained exactly why he was willing to let the third party lose what they lost yesterday, and why everything he had secretly changed was ultimately leading back to you. That sentence was the one thing your soulmate had struggled to write because once he said it clearly, there would be no pretending anymore. He had reportedly written something close to a confession. He could rebuild what money had been lost, but he could not rebuild a future with you if he kept allowing other people to make his choices. That was the heart of everything. The third party had assumed his secret changes were designed to hurt them financially, but his message suggested something completely different. He wasn't trying to destroy their life. He was trying to reclaim his own. And there was another detail hidden in the message that made the situation even more emotional. Your soulmate admitted that he had waited too long to protect what mattered because he kept believing there would always be more time. Then something happened recently that made him realize you might eventually stop waiting for answers he had been too afraid to give. That realization explains why his actions suddenly became so decisive. Before, your soulmate could be persuaded to delay things, reconsider them, or keep uncomfortable arrangements alive simply to avoid conflict. But this time, something inside him had changed. The third party discovered that at least one person had tried to warn him about the financial consequences before yesterday. He knew there could be a major loss. He understood that people would become angry. Yet instead of reversing his decision, he reportedly asked one question: what happens if I leave everything exactly as it is? The answer disturbed him more than the possibility of losing money. Staying in the old arrangement meant remaining connected to the same pressure that had already affected his relationship with you. So he accepted the financial fallout. But don't skip, because the third party has now realized something even more alarming. They believe your soulmate didn't make these changes simply to become free. They think he was creating room for a specific move toward you. And that suspicion became much stronger when someone finally revealed what your soulmate had been asking about privately. He wanted to know whether an important personal decision could be made immediately after the old financial connection was fully separated. He wasn't asking hypothetically. He wanted a timeline. That is why the third party's search became frantic. If they could reach him before that final step, they believed they might convince him to delay everything again. But your soulmate had already anticipated that possibility. He apparently told one trusted person that he did not want another conversation based on guilt, money, or obligation. This time, he wanted his next choice to come from what he genuinely felt. And then that trusted person revealed one last detail. Your soulmate had asked them to keep something safe until he was ready to approach you. Nobody expected what it was. Because when the third party learned that this item existed, they suddenly understood that his plans involving you may have started much earlier than yesterday, and what he had kept hidden could reveal just how serious those plans truly were. The item your soulmate asked someone to protect was not valuable because of its price. Its value came from what it represented. It was connected to a promise he had once imagined making to you, long before yesterday's financial chaos exposed everything. He had kept it hidden because he wasn't ready to place something meaningful in your hands while another person still had influence over his decisions. That detail stunned the third party. They had believed his feelings for you were temporary, something distance and pressure would eventually erase. Instead, they were discovering that even during the quietest period, your soulmate had been thinking ahead. And suddenly his willingness to accept such a huge financial loss made emotional sense. He had reached a point where protecting appearances was costing him more than money ever could. He was terrified that one day he would finally become free, only to discover that you had already closed the door. That fear had apparently been growing for some time. Someone close to him remembered a moment when your soulmate asked whether a person could forgive someone who had taken too long to choose them openly. He didn't explain who he meant, but now the answer seems obvious. He was thinking about you. He knew silence could look like indifference. He knew his delays might have made you question whether his feelings were ever genuine. What you couldn't see was the private battle happening behind those delays. Every time he considered moving toward you, the old arrangement appeared again: money, obligations, expectations, and the third party's ability to turn every decision into another conflict. Yesterday changed that. By secretly altering the connection that gave them leverage, your soulmate accepted one painful loss to prevent a much greater one. But something unexpected happened afterward. Instead of immediately coming toward you, he stopped. There was still one truth he believed you deserved to hear before he placed that hidden item in your hands. And this is where the third party's desperate search became even more intense. They discovered that your soulmate had arranged a private conversation with someone who knew the entire history, someone who understood exactly how the financial connection had been used to influence his choices. The third party feared that once this person spoke, secrets they had carefully kept separate would finally connect. So they began searching for both of them, hoping to interrupt whatever was about to happen. But they were already late. That conversation had taken place. Your soulmate listened without defending anyone, and what he learned reportedly left him silent for several minutes. Because yesterday's huge financial loss was not the only thing the third party had hidden from him. There had been another decision involving you, one made without your soulmate fully understanding what was happening. And when he finally discovered what had been done in his name, his entire reason for finding you changed. What your soulmate learned in that private conversation struck deeper than the financial loss ever could. He discovered that at a crucial moment in the past, the third party had allowed him to believe you were pulling away on your own. Certain information had been delayed, softened, or presented in a way that made your silence look like a decision against him. He had carried that interpretation for far too long. It explained why he sometimes stopped himself from reaching out, even when everything inside him wanted to know the truth. But now he was hearing another version of what happened, and suddenly old moments began making sense. The distance. The unanswered questions. The strange timing whenever he tried to move closer to you. He realized money had not been the only form of influence surrounding him. His understanding of you had been influenced too. And that realization changed his mood completely, because he could accept losing money, but discovering that he might have lost precious time with you because of someone else's interference was much harder to forgive. That was when your soulmate reportedly made another decision. He would not confront the third party first. He would not waste his energy arguing over every detail or demanding explanations that could easily become excuses. He wanted to hear from you.